Hi, it's Debbie here. I just wanted to do a quick video today because unfortunately, I've had quite a few parents contact me today, one way or another, explaining to me that their children are struggling a little bit. It's SATS week, and unfortunately, there's a lot of children that are going to school this week feeling quite nervous and stressed about doing their SATS. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with some parents over the last few weeks or months to help prepare their children for this. But I know there's a lot of you out there who maybe haven't managed to get in any preparation, or that hadn't realised that your children are quite stressed about doing them until, a couple of weeks ago. Might not have even entered their heads until recently. So what I wanted to do was just give you a very quick video on my 3 top tips for things that you can still do this week with your children to help them, to help boost their confidence and to just give them that extra bit that they might need in order to complete their exams. Okay, so what I do want to point out beforehand is that, I'm not going to get into a whole debate about whether children should or shouldn't be tested at this age. I think everybody has their view on this. The simple fact is that schools are doing the tests in order to get some markers in place so that they're prepared both with their league tables and ready for senior school so that they know what each child's aiming for. That's not going to change. It's not going to change anytime soon. So my view is, if you can't change that, then help the children to be more prepared. 3 top tips I have for you. The first one is to get them to tap into something that they've done really well recently. Doesn't have to be exam related, so it doesn't have to be sort of the maths, English, or any of the key subjects. It can be something as simple as they went and played a football match this weekend and scored a goal. Get them to tap into that, a time when they've felt really confident, really good about themselves and done something that they're really proud of. And when I say tap into it, I mean take them back to doing that thing, whatever it was. So let's say if it was playing football and they scored a goal at the weekend, that's fantastic. Get them back to that football ground or that field where they're running around with their friends. Ask them what they were doing, who was there, who was running around with them, what could they see, what could they hear? Could they hear the parents from the sideline shouting and screaming when they scored? Were their teammates rejoicing and running around and laughing and screaming when they scored the goal? What was actually going on, and get them to relive that moment. As you see their futures change, you'll see them really genuinely reliving it. And that's a brilliant thing to do. And talk about that 2 or 3 times. Now, that's part of a process that we call anchoring in NLP. And that's something that I talk about in more detail at seminars and workshops. In fact, I think there's another video or something on anchoring that I've done previously. Just doing this process will be enough for them to get that real buzz and to remember something that's made them feel really good about themselves. So big up the good stuff. My second tip is based around how we access information. Now, have you ever watched somebody speaking? In fact, you're probably seeing it quite a lot with me while I'm doing this video. As people are talking, their eyes tend to dart around all over the place. Now, what they're doing generally while they're talking to you and their eyes are moving around is they're accessing information. And when we look up, we tend to access or construct a visual memory. So we're either creating a picture of something that we want to remember, i.e. something that we've written down, or a picture, or something that we've seen previously, or we're actually trying to construct a picture in our head. So it might not be something that we've seen already, but we want to imagine what that might look like. So, for example, if we want to construct a picture of an elephant riding a unicycle, it's not something that you see every day. So you will look up into your visual field and access what that might look like. If I was to ask you what your front door looked like, you would access your visual field to remember a memory of what your front door would look like, and you'd be able to describe that to me. If you see people where their eyes are darting from left to right, that generally means that they're accessing auditory information, so something that they've heard previously, or they're trying to create a sound that they might hear. So, for example, if you want to hear what you imagine a cow would sound like if it was snorting instead of mooing, then you would have to construct that auditory sound for yourself. If you wanted to remember what your cell phone sounds like when it rings, your mobile phone, then you would also access your auditory field to remember what that sounds like, so that you could tell somebody that. Now, when we look down, we access our feelings. And so we can then access how we felt when something happened. So if I was to say to you, how did you feel when you had your first kiss? Now, probably what you'll do is you'll look up first of all, because you'll want to picture that moment or picture who you were with. But then you'll probably look down to access your feelings, how you actually felt at the time, what it felt like for you. Now, when we have a feeling, when we have an intense feeling, if we continue to look down, we prolong that feeling. So maybe you've seen this with your children before, when they're in a really bad mood or they're really glum and they're looking down at the floor. Yeah, well, that's just intensifying that feeling. The more they look down, the more intense that feeling's getting the whole time that they're looking down. So my suggestion and tip number 2 is get them to look up. So when you're walking to school and they're looking down, dragging their feet and they're nervous and all the rest of it, then start getting them to look up. Point out the trees on the way into school. Point out all the things, some birds in the trees. Point out a building that you might have seen a million times, but just show them anyway. Again, ask them to picture something that they've done recently or they can remember recently. Because all the time that they're looking up, they're accessing their visual field rather than how they're feeling. And so it gives them the opportunity to let go. It might be just for a short while, but all the time they're looking up, they can let go of that nervous feeling. It's a great one to teach them as well for when they're actually sitting the exam. Because unfortunately, when we do exams, we look down because we're sat and we're looking at the paper on our desks. And so we're tapping into how we feel at the time. It would be fantastic if schools would actually give us a whiteboard that is on the wall that we could look up to. Because obviously that would be tapping into our visual field, which is a lot more constructive when it comes to remembering information that we need for an exam. So again, if you want to give your child a top tip for when they're actually doing their exam, the moment that they start to feel nervous or get slightly stressed, or they feel that they can't remember something, instead of looking down at their paper, just tell them to take a few moments out just to look up, see if they can remember the book they were reading when they learnt that information, or if they can picture the board that the information was written on, if their teacher had written the information on the whiteboard. So get them to picture something, get them to look up and get out of their feelings. And top tip number 3. This can be done, this unfortunately can't be done on the way to school, the other 2 can, but this can be done at home and it doesn't take very long to do, is if your child is constantly saying to you that they can't do something, so for example, can't do maths, rubbish at maths, break it down for them. Because the chances are they're only actually not so good at one very, very small portion of maths. So I usually do this using the example of a pie or a circle on a piece of paper. Draw a circle out and then ask them to tell you what that activity is made up of. So if we're taking maths, for example, divide that up into, it can be divided into, addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. It could probably be divided up into a lot more things than that, but just for the purposes of this, we'll just use those 4 things. And then ask your child to rate each one on a scale of 1 to 10 of how good they are at it. So, for example, at addition, yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm a 9. I think I'm a 9 out of 10. I can do that one in my head. On subtraction, Yeah, pretty good at that too. So let's give that, let's say an 8.5 for that one. Not as good as, I'm not as quick as I am adding up, but subtraction I can do pretty well. Okay, multiplication, bit more difficult. Do know my tables, but I'm a little bit slower at it. So I would give that a 7 out of 10. And division, yeah, really not my strong point at all. So I would give myself about a 5 out of 10 for division. Now that I've done that, I would mark out on my piece of paper, so I've got a circle, and I would mark out where I think 9 comes and draw a line around the pie to say where 9 comes to. On my next segment, I said 8.5, I think, so a little bit less on subtraction, draw a line where that comes. On multiplication, I think I said I was an 8 in that, so yeah, reasonable, so draw a line where the 8 comes. And then division, I'm only actually a 5 on division, so I'll do my piece of pie about halfway up the segment. And then get them to colour in that middle section. So colour in up to the line where they've said their point scores are. And that gives you a pie that's coloured in and looks like most of it, the majority, is actually coloured. So what you're telling your child is, actually, out of all of that, the only thing that they're not so good at is division, which makes up a very, very small portion of the pie. Because the bit that you're left in that isn't coloured in actually is a fraction of that whole pie. And this is a really simple way to get children to picture how good they are at something, because if you break it down and you show them the things that they can do, and then show them the little bit that they can do some extra work on where they need to work at, it's actually nowhere near as bad as they have constructed in their head. Because unfortunately, they've filtered this so that it's become a much bigger problem than it actually is. So use the pie to break down. That's my third top tip. So there's 3 top tips there of things that you can do this week very easily with your kids to help boost their confidence for doing their SATs. I hope this has been useful for you, and I hope this week goes well for all of you, because I know it's a testing time for everybody in the family. So good luck to the children and the parents for getting through this week. And if you've got any questions, drop them below or email me at debbie@emotions-im.co.uk. And I'll speak to you soon. Take care.